Did Benjamin Franklin write a letter regarding his beliefs and the Christian religion in general? If all that's said in this letter is true, why then was he outwardly presenting himself as a deist? What are all these new findings about his faith, his views on Jesus Christ, and the life he supposedly kept hidden from the world about? Should we now consider this founding father as a Christian, or do we continue to label him as a deist? Also, what were all the dead bodies found in his London house basement about? Why has this been kept from the public for almost 100 years? Today, we're going to share with you a document that contains a letter written by Benjamin Franklin shedding light on his faith and connection to Christianity. Besides this, we will give you details about the dead bodies that were uncovered in his basement in his London house, with 6 of them being children. Okay, so this is what we are talking about today, so let's get straight to it. Benjamin Franklin was a man of the Enlightenment, known for his scientific pursuits, political contributions, and philosophical writings. While he wasn't particularly outspoken about his personal religious beliefs, his writings do offer some insights into his thoughts on Jesus and Christianity. Franklin was a deist, which means he believed in a creator but was skeptical of organized religion and the supernatural aspects of Christianity, such as miracles and the divinity of Jesus. However, he greatly respected the moral teachings of Jesus and saw them as valuable guidelines for living a virtuous life. In a letter to Ezra Stiles, the president of Yale College, dated March 9, 1790, just a month before his death, Franklin wrote some shocking details about his beliefs, and people must know this. It will let you decide whether he was a deist or just a Christian who hid this because of the public influence he had. The letter Benjamin Franklin wrote to Ezra Stiles, in which he expressed his views on Jesus, is now made public in various historical collections and libraries. The letter is included in the Writings of Benjamin Franklin, a multi-volume collection edited by Albert Henry Smith. It appears in volume 10 under Franklin's letters from 1789 to 1790, so the doubting Thomases can go and verify. The letter is also included in the Papers of Benjamin Franklin, a comprehensive edition of Franklin's correspondence and other writings, edited by Leonard W. Laborie and others. This collection is published by Yale University Press. If you are asking that, who was this guy called Ezra Stiles, and why would Franklin write such a letter to him? Then, Ezra Stiles was a prominent figure in 18th century America. He was a distinguished clergyman, theologian, and scholar, best known for his role as the president of Yale College, now Yale University. Benjamin Franklin wrote a letter to Ezra Stiles, the president of Yale College, in response to a request Stiles had made. Stiles had asked Franklin for his opinion on several matters, particularly about Franklin's religious beliefs and his views on Jesus Christ. Stiles was deeply interested in the personal beliefs of prominent figures of the time, and as a theologian and intellectual, he was likely curious about how Franklin, a renowned thinker and scientist, reconciled his scientific pursuits with his religious beliefs. Given Franklin's reputation as a deist, Stiles wanted to understand Franklin's perspective more clearly. In this letter, Franklin answered Stiles' inquiry by expressing his admiration for Jesus' moral teachings, while also revealing his doubts about the traditional Christian doctrine of Jesus' divinity. Franklin's response was measured and respectful, acknowledging the value of Jesus' teachings, while remaining in some way non-dogmatic about theological issues which he considered beyond his expertise. But if you're a Christian here, you will see clearly which side he was based on the letter. So without any delay, let me read the letter and add a little commentary to clarify things for you. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section and subscribe to be notified of our next surprising topic. And now the letter. Philadelphia, March 9, 1790. Dear Ezra, you desire to know something of my religion. It is the first time I have been questioned upon it, but I cannot take your curiosity amiss and shall endeavor in a few words to gratify it. Franklin opens by acknowledging Stiles' interest in his religious beliefs. His willingness to address this inquiry, despite its rarity, indicates his readiness to discuss his faith openly, even if he has been reserved about it in public. One of the things we skipped in the autobiography was his going to church. He went to the Presbyterian church for a while, but he quit. He stopped going because the minister preached Presbyterianism instead of morality. Franklin would listen to the sermons, but he thought they were not improving him. He was not becoming a better person. The beginning of the letter makes it a different world than what we were just looking at. The Presby fathers preaching like sinners at the hands of an angry God. But nobody's bothered to ask Ben what he thinks. So we see he's more than happy to get someone, at this point of his life, to ask him also what he thinks. Now, let's go on. Here is my creed. I believe in one God, creator of the universe, that he governs it by his providence, that he ought to be worshipped, that the most acceptable service we render to him is doing good to his other children, that the soul of man is immortal and will be treated with justice in another life respecting its conduct in this. These I take to be the fundamental points in all sound religion, and I regard them as you do in whatever sect I meet with them. Okay, so in this area, Franklin outlines his core beliefs, which align closely with Christian doctrine. He professes belief in a singular, omnipotent God who governs the universe and asserts the importance of worship and moral living. But this is not a new thing about him based on his public belief as a deist. His emphasis on doing good to others and the immortality of the soul reflects traditional Christian values. Believe it or not, even though he presents these beliefs through a deistic lens, his early upbringing as a Christian hasn't all that changed. Franklin's creed subtly acknowledges the Christian understanding of God and morality while framing it within a more general philosophical context to prove his grounds as to what he believes in and what he wants the public to see him in case the letter escalates into something else. Let's get going. As to Jesus of Nazareth, my opinion of whom you particularly desire. I think his system of morals and his religion as he left them to us, the best the world ever saw or is likely to see. But I apprehend it has received various corrupting changes, and I have, with most of the present dissenters in England, some doubts as to his divinity, though it is a question I do not dogmatize upon, having never studied it and think it needless to busy myself with it now, when I expect soon an opportunity of knowing the truth with less trouble. Franklin's admiration for Jesus' teachings and moral system is evident, and he recognizes them as impossible. His concerns about corrupting changes and doubts about the divinity of Jesus are framed in a way that respects the significance of Christian beliefs while maintaining a level of intellectual caution. But in this area, I think we will side a little bit with him, because the Bibles we read today weren't what the Jews read before. We know there is more to it, but I think we have more than enough to believe in with the little passed on to us. Even with this small one, how well do we abide by all that's written in it, let alone to ask for all that was left out to be added back to it? Next, Franklin's reluctance to delve deeply into theological debates and his anticipation of clearer answers in the future suggest a deep, albeit understated, connection to the Christian faith. I see no harm, however, in its being believed, if that belief has the good consequence, as probably it has, of making his doctrines more respected and more observed, especially as I do not perceive that the Supreme takes it amiss by distinguishing the unbelievers in his government of the world with any peculiar marks of his displeasure. Here, Franklin acknowledges that belief in Jesus' divinity, while not central to his own religious practice, may have positive effects by encouraging respect for Jesus' teachings. He indicates that such belief aligns with a view of a benevolent God who does not punish unbelief harshly, reflecting a perspective that integrates Christian values with a broader, inclusive view of divine justice. I shall only add, respecting myself, that having experienced the goodness of that being in conducting me prosperously through a long life, I have no doubt of its continuance in the next, though without the smallest conceit of meriting such goodness. Franklin's personal testimony about experiencing divine goodness throughout his life and his expectation of its continuation in the afterlife reflects a heartfelt Christian belief in God's grace and providence. His humility and acknowledgement of divine favor throughout what we just shared suggest a deep-seated Christian faith, though he expresses it in a manner that aligns with his public deistic stance. My sentiments on this head you will see in the copy of an old letter enclosed, which I wrote in answer to one from a zealous religionist whom I had relieved in a paralytic case by electricity, and who, being afraid I should grow proud upon it, sent me his serious though rather impertinent caution. I send you also the copy of another letter, which will show something of my disposition relating to religion. Franklin refers to additional letters that provide further insight into his religious disposition. The mention of his response to a zealous individual demonstrates his engagement with Christian faith in practice and his respectful approach to religious discourse, even when it involves criticism. With great and sincere esteem and affection, I am your obliged old friend and most obedient humble servant, Franklin's closing expresses deep respect and affection for Stiles, reflecting his genuine commitment to maintaining personal relationships and engaging in meaningful dialogue about faith. P.S. Had not your college some present of books from the King of France? Please to let me know if you had an expectation given you of more, and the nature of that expectation. I have a reason for the inquiry. The postscript about the books from the King of France adds a practical and personal touch to the letter, showing Franklin's continued interest in academic and intellectual affairs. I confide that you will not expose me to criticisms and censures by publishing any part of this communication to you. I have ever let others enjoy their religious sentiments without reflecting on them for those that appeared to me unsupportable or even absurd. All sects here, and we have a great variety, have experienced my goodwill in assisting them with subscriptions for building their new places of worship, and as I have never opposed any of their doctrines, I hope to go out of the world in peace with them all. This part of the letter suggests why it was kept from the public for more than 200 years. He didn't want anyone to criticize him or give him a Christian title because he thought he fell short of understanding in such area, and didn't want anyone to overpower him on that aspect given his social status and all the intelligence he had. So he picked a neutral stance in beliefs to avoid all criticism and confrontation by people who are well vested in such areas. His request for confidentiality and his respectful attitude toward diverse religious beliefs stress his desire to maintain peace and goodwill. His support for various religious groups and the non-confrontational stance he has chosen reflect the personal faith we think he has. And that, while potentially understated in public, is rooted in Christian core moral and practical principles of tolerance and charity. Now, on the other hand, the discovery of plenty of human bones which were found in his basement is another big thing. This was even aired on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, and even Joe could not believe it when his guest brought it up. Let's check out that video.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Dude, you ever hear about what Ben Franklin was? Okay, that's a different story. But
what did he do?
You never heard that, like, what he was found in? They found in his house?
No.
Like tons of bodies, bro.
What?
Ben Franklin, they found tons of bodies in his.
Ben Franklin was a serial killer?
No, he was like doing some weird shit, dude. Bodies.
Like
stuff.
experimenting with bodies?
Yeah.
Is this real?
Everything I say.
Was Ben Franklin's basement filled with skeletons? Repairs on Franklin's old London house turned up 1,200 pieces of bone from at least 15 people. Holy shit. For nearly 2 decades. By the way, this is from the Smithsonian. This is not some wacky conspiracy
This ain't
site.
samtripoli.com.
Yeah.
So now I will tell you what we discovered when we dug deeper into it. In December 1997, 36 Craven Street was undergoing extensive renovation to transform it into the Benjamin Franklin Museum. While digging in the basement, a builder turned up a grisly discovery, a pit filled with human bones, including those of several infants, which prompted a call to the police. I would say in my 30 years in the police service that this is the first private address I have been to where there have been bones found actually concealed in the property, says retired Detective Inspector Jim O'Connell, Metropolitan Police Service, New Scotland Yard. I thought I need to get some expert advice here. We called on a local coroner to come and give us some assistance. An investigation by Dr. Paul Knapman, retired coroner for the city of Westminster, revealed that the bones were more than a century old, but a more precise dating of the bones was needed to pinpoint when they were stashed, and thus determine who had been occupying 36 Craven Street, since many others besides Franklin lived in the townhouse over the years. Tests conducted by Professor Simon Hilson, University College London, a specialist in the biology and history of human remains, uncovered findings that proved pivotal in dating the bones to the mid-1700s, surprisingly, the time when Franklin occupied Craven Street.
Nearly 2 decades leading up to the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Benjamin Franklin lived in London in a house on 36 Craven Street. In 1776, Franklin left his English home to come back to America. More than 200 years later, 15 bodies were found in the basement, buried in a secret windowless room beneath the garden. In 1998, conservationists were doing repairs on 36 Craven, looking to turn Franklin's old haunt into a museum. From a 1 meter wide, 1 meter deep pit, over 1,200 pieces of bone were retrieved. Remnants of more than a dozen bodies, said Benjamin Franklin's house. 6 were children. Forensic investigation showed that the bones dated to Franklin's day. Holy shit. The most plausible explanation is not mass murder, but an anatomy school run by Benjamin's young friend and protege, William Hewson. Oh, just an anatomy school.
Yeah, and we're just going to bury them downstairs.
Okay, anatomy was still in its infancy, but the day's social and ethical mores frowned upon it. A steady supply of human bodies was hard to come by legally, so Hewson, Hunter, and Field's other pioneers had to turn to grave robbing, either paying professional resurrection men to procure cadavers or digging them up themselves to get their hands on specimens. Researchers think 36 Craven was an irresistible spot for Houston to establish his own anatomy lab. The tenant was a trusted friend, and the landlady was his mother-in-law, and he was flanked by convenient sources for corpses. Bodies could be smuggled from graveyards and delivered to the wharf at one end of the street or snatched from the gallows at the other end. When he was done with them, Houston simply buried whatever was left of the bodies in the basement rather than sneak them out for disposal elsewhere and risk getting caught and prosecuted for dissection and grave robbing. Franklin was probably aware of the illegal studies going on in his building, says the Benjamin Franklin house, but it's doubtful that he was involved himself. Still, we can't imagine that, curious man that he was, he didn't sneak down and check out the proceedings at least once or twice. Of course he did. Could you imagine if you're my friend and we live together and I say, Sam, what are you up to? You're like, bro, we got to find out how people work, and there's only one way to do it. We got to look at bodies. Whoa, how are you going to do that? We got to find a place where we can fucking legally or secretly look at bodies. Well, I got a basement. Okay, so what do we do with the bodies? Well, fucking bury them, bro. But back then, when they were studying medicine, isn't that what they did? Like, all those people that like studied anatomy back then, how did they, if it was illegal to study anatomy, if it was illegal to study bodies, how else would they find out how anatomy worked?
That seems weird, but who knows? They had weird laws back then, but
It does seem weird, but it makes sense, right? Because if they had never studied anatomy before, and then all of a sudden it came along and like, well, we got to fuck up your grandpa.
Right.
We got to carve grandpa up like a turkey to find out what makes people tick. You know?
So weird note to add in another article about this.
Oh boy.
It's just
Franklin's history as a Mason was one of the historian's initial points of inquiry. Though shrouded in secrecy, Masonic rituals have dark, known undercurrents which have at times gone horribly wrong. For example, in a 2004 initiation ceremony, a new member was accidentally shot by a member who meant to fire an empty gun but instead fired a loaded one. So
Yeah.
they fake shot at each other.
yeah.
But when historians dug deeper into what was going on in the Franklin home during the years the bones dated back to, they discovered the real culprit behind the bones was one of William Houston,
Yeah,
the
the real
medical
article's the
student.
same.
Yeah, they're basically saying the same thing.
Crazy.
Okay, so if you've made it this far, let's hear your thoughts on this. Thanks for watching.